In this lesson, we'll be creating what's called a double jump feature, and I'll demonstrate it here and then I'll explain a little bit how it was built, of course, and then we'll go through the step-by-steps on building this from scratch. Now, let me just hit the play button here on this finished file. And you can see I've got a general environment here outlined with the red walls and floors and these sort of different levels of platforms. And the idea here is a very simple objective, but I want to be able to take this guy and be able to jump and land on the next platform and then take a run here and land on this and ultimately get to the top level, if you will. So as I said, I have left and right motion. And I also have a jump motion. Now we're not using the move feature in this. We're going to be working with attributes to create our motion today. But if I combine one of the directions and hit my spacebar, you see that it has a jump. And it does carry the momentum when we use the attributes for the motion. All right, so I do get that nice arc in there. And the idea here is that if I jump, one jump won't get me high enough to jump on this platform, but I should be able to create a second jump while I'm in the air, but not a third. So I want to limit it to 2 jumps. So the idea here is, let me just show you here. I'll just hit my space bar to jump, and try to observe, but when I'm in the air, I will hit the space bar again and it'll kind of elevate even further, but after that, it will not respawn. So I'll just put it over here in the open area, and 1, 2. But you notice after I click after the second jump, it no longer has jumping features. We're going to learn how to work that through with the logic as well. So again, 1, 2, and then nothing else. So here, with the way it's built, I should be able to take a run, jump, and then jump again, and just land there. Now, you see it's actually bumping around. I actually forgot to fix that. So let me go back to my editor and do a little fix in my physics. And I'm already on my character, which I've named Hero, my actor named Hero. I'm just going to turn on the checkbox for fixed rotation. And let me quickly demonstrate that again. Okay, so I've got very little bounce going on here, but if I take a run for it, and run and then jump again, and I do have to time it properly, but you see how that second jump gave me just enough elevation. And again, jump, jump again, and there we go. Now let's say I jump and jump again and then keep hitting. It no longer reacts until it hits the ground or one of these platforms. When it touches the platform, we actually have a reset built in so that it resets the jump count back to 2 and allows me for 2 more jumps. But once I leave the ground, I have 1 more jump left. So again, jump, jump. And there, obviously, I didn't catch the targets, so I would have to kind of line it up a bit better. And there we go. And I just caught it. Okay. Now you can actually control how high it jumps and so on by setting the numbers accordingly. And through a little trial and error, I had figured out what was sort of appropriate and best for the game. All right, so that's the demo on what we're going to achieve today in our lesson. The idea here again is that we're going to create a counter, and by wanting to create a counter, we're going to have to create our first custom attribute within an actor, which will actually be like a variable, if you will. It'll be like a container for information, and we will contain number information within that, and just check that number to see if our guy can jump again. I'm just going to go back to the editor now. Now, before we build this from scratch, let's just do a little walk around to see basically how it was created, and then we will, as I said, create a brand new one from scratch. I'm just going to hide this for a second. If I go over to my library, just show you my actors. I have 3 basic actors, the floor, the wall, and the hero. And I had created a tag so that I could sort of consolidate the wall and the floor. With respect to collisions, I can just use the tag then when I'm referring to collisions and the hero. So I did create a tag called ground, and I dragged in floor and wall. All right, the hero is what contains all of the programming in the backstage area. Let's go through some of the basic properties here on the hero. If I just drag up here, I have sized the hero to be, if I can open this, 50 pixels wide by 75 pixels tall. And I just picked a purple color for that, as you can see here. And with respect to the physics, let's go down to the physics here. The physics, I had set the bounciness to 0.25. Possibly could go even lower than that for this exercise, but let's just, I'm going to leave it at that. I did check off fixed rotation, so it would not tumble if it hits the edges of these platforms, for example. I don't want it to tumble when it falls off, so it will keep its up and down positioning. I do want it to remain movable, of course. All right, and those are the only things that I would point out here. Again, the physics, the big thing is I changed bounciness to 0.25 and checked off fixed rotation. Okay, so that's the hero. Let's go take a quick look at the floor. Floor is 50 by 50 pixels. 50 by 50 pixels, and colorized it red. And again, it's just a square. There's no graphics involved. With respect to physics, though, this is going to be the same for both the floor and the wall. I turned off density, friction, and bounciness. When I say turned off, I mean I set them all to 0. You'll notice here fixed rotation is off. Well, that's sort of a moot point because it's not movable. So unchecked movable, unchecked fixed rotation, density, friction, bounciness, all set to 0. Exactly the same for the wall. Okay, they're basically the same as far as features go, but they are separate actors. Okay, so if we go down here, friction, bounciness, density, all set to 0. It's not movable, and there's no fixed rotation. That means when our hero collides with them, these things won't go flying around all willy-nilly. They will be solid and fixed in their locked locations, if you will. Okay, so that's the basics on the actors. Let me go to the hero. And let's call up the backstage. This is where all the action takes place. And we've got a basic accelerate, something. These are things we've done before. This is what's creating the gravity. So maybe if I append this name, accelerate dash gravity. It's fake gravity, but it works as gravity. The collide, again, I mentioned I set up the tag so that I could collide with an actor with a tag called ground. And that's what I called that tag right there, ground. Okay, so those are just the basics, the collision features and the gravity features. Now the move rules, I have a section called move rules. This is brand new for how we have been creating moves. And I also have a counter reset for the double jump, and we'll talk about that momentarily. Okay, so the move rules are going to work a little differently here. Let me just open these all up. Okay, and if I scroll up, I've got 3 conditions. And it's kind of working in a backwards way. It's saying if my right key, my left key, and my space key are all up, in other words, I'm not pressing them, I will set the linear motion of the hero, and I did it through this button here, and we'll do that when we do our rebuild. I set it to 0. In other words, I stop the motion when these keys are not being pressed. So as soon as you release the key, it will stop. Okay, it will no longer generate the motion. So everything else is in the else section. So the actual motion is in the else section. So let me just collapse this for a second to make some room. And let's start with the walk right. And it's virtually the same as the walk left, of course. It is a rule contained within the else section. It's a rule. And it has a condition, 2 conditions. If the right key is pressed down and the actor is currently on the floor, do the following, which is a change attribute. So let me open that. So the attribute being changed is the linear velocity on the x-axis, and I changed it to a positive number of 200. Positive numbers move to the right, negative numbers move to the left. And I don't think I have anything in the else here. No, we don't. Okay, so this is in the else of the rule called move rules. When the key is up, we are saying set the motion to 0. Otherwise, in the else section, we have a rule for each motion. The walk right is checking 2 conditions, whether the right key is down and it's on the floor, and if those conditions are met, we will change that velocity, which is originally set to 0, to 200 as a positive number, and that will move it to the right. So let me just quickly review the left one. Same idea, except it's the left key. and we have a minus 200, which will move it to the left. Okay, now the jump is similar, but we're working with the y-axis. So if I hold this down, and I will explain the second condition when we build it, but this is what creates the double jump. But we do have two conditions. One is the space bar. Second one is checking the value of a custom attribute. I'll show you where it is. I created it, and I'll show you how we create it when we do the rebuild here, but I've got a custom attribute called jump count with a default value of 0. So we're going to check that number here as a condition, and we're going to say if it's greater than 0, we will allow it to jump. And this is the logic behind the double jump, so let me explain it here. So again, the jump is looking for the space bar and a condition of the value of a custom attribute, and I set it to integer, which means whole numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we can't have fractions. And it's defaulted to 0. So it's saying if it's greater than 0, and we hit the space bar, jump. So how do we set it greater than 0? Well, when we hit the jump key, if it's greater than 0, it will move. If it's not greater than 0, well, it will do this anyway. It's going to subtract 1 from the count. So we actually have a counter, and that's that other rule that you saw sitting outside of this, which actually sets it to 2 every time it touches the ground. I know that's a lot to digest, but as we build it, I think it's going to all sink in. So again, I'm doing two things when I hit the space bar. One, I'm attempting to move it if all conditions are met. And two, and this is jumping upwards, I am subtracting 1 from the value of the jump count. So when this gets set to 2, every time I jump, it decreases by 1. So if you think about it, when I hit it the second time, I'm subtracting 1 from 1, which comes back to 0. And it will no longer jump because it will no longer be greater than 0. Okay, I know that's a lot to digest, but just go on a little faith here, if you will, or just play this back again if you need to. Okay, we will build this from scratch, and as we build, I will be re-explaining again. So let me close this, okay, and let me close the whole moves thing. And this is the reset that I was referring to. I called it rule counter reset. And it's pretty basic. It's saying when the actor collides with the floor, just the floor, not the walls. In other words, when it hits the ground, what will it do? It will set the jump count to 2. So when it reached 0 up in the air, once we hit the ground, it goes back and resets it to 2, which will allow the condition to jump because it will be greater than 0. Okay, so we're really working with logic today. It's pretty basic mechanics, but it's about the logic today. So that is how this whole thing works. Okay, so if you understood that, you could probably go ahead and build this right now, but I will build one from scratch here after I do a quick play one more time. Okay, so boom, when it hits the ground, it resets that custom attribute, a counter, to 0, or sorry, to 2. It sets it to 2. And when I hit spacebar, I'm subtracting 1 from that counter every time I hit the spacebar. And the condition to jump in this first place is that if the counter is greater than 0, it will jump. So when I hit once, it's down to 1, down to 0, and you see when I keep hitting it, it no longer responds. As soon as it hits the ground, it's reset it to 2, which is greater than 0, and it will allow me to jump. So if you think about it, it's at 2. When I jump once, I'm bringing the counter down to the value of 1. When I hit the space bar the second time, I am deducting another 1 from that counter, so 1 minus 1 equals 0. Therefore, when I jump, it's no longer meeting the condition of being greater than 0, and that's why it doesn't respond after the second jump. Okay, so you're going to have to wrap your head around some of that math and logic, if you will. And let me just try this again. Okay, moving, jump, jump, and that will allow us the ability to jump twice and to reach that next plateau. Now the numbers with the jump, I believe I set the jump velocity to 500, left and right velocity to 200. All right, now I was just through a little bit of trial and error and determined that those numbers really did achieve what I was hoping for. Okay, so the next step is we will build one of these from scratch. So I'm just going to go back to editor here and we'll start a new file. Okay, so I'm going to create a new file now. New. Would you like to save? Yes, I definitely want to save that. Okay. And we will call this last name underscore lesson number. So again, these may vary, but currently this is, I have it under 5D, 05D. iPad landscape, resolution independence, create project. I don't have to import any assets for this lesson, so we'll just create some actors from scratch here. Three little actors. First one I'll call Hero. And let's just create it 50 by 75 pixels. So 50 pixels wide by 70 pixels high. And I'll give him a color, I'll give it a purple color here. Okay, so there's my hero. And let's see, anything else we want to do right now? Maybe for the, actually we'll deal with physics and things a little bit later. Okay, let's just create another set of actors. This one I'll call floor. And I'll just make it 50 pixels square. I'm going to go through this a little bit fast if I can. Just hit your enter key to make sure that enters. So 50 by 50, and we'll attribute a color of red. I'll pick the bright red here. And I'll do a second one called walls so that I have a distinction here. And again, I'll deal with the physics a little bit later, but let's just get our graphics going. Okay, and we'll call this one wall. It's going to be exactly the same as the floor, ironically, and I guess I could have duplicated that with a alt click and drag. Regardless, we are going to create this one way or another. Okay, 50 by 50, and again, the same red color. Okay, and let me do a save here. And then apply those to the stage. Okay, this is my first save. There we go. That was a folder I'm saving all my projects in, and you should have the same sort of folder going on. I'm just going to move my backstage down here. And I may ultimately hide it, but for now I'm just going to drag it down below. And we're going to build the floor and the walls. Alright, so with the floor, just going to drag that in. I'm just going to expand it on its horizontal axis here, just by grabbing that slider. I don't know why these things move around a little bit, but we'll just deal with that. Okay, so there's my floor, and now I'll grab the wall asset, the wall actor, and we'll drag that up, and this one I will ultimately duplicate on the stage. Okay, and alt click and drag. Then I released, and then I grabbed it again. Okay. And let me just move this guy down here. All right, that's good enough for what we need. And I'll just create a couple of horizontal platforms now, again, with the floor element. I'll put one over here. If I can grab it. Okay. There's one. I think I'll move it up a bit higher. Okay, alt click and drag. And alt click and drag. Now I may decide to slightly move these around according to how my reaction goes with the hero and the distance for the jumps and so on, but I'm just going to rough them in for now. And likely it will be fine anyway, but let me just save that. Control S on the keyboard. So there's my basic environment. So let me grab the hero now and quickly drag him out. And I want him to fall again, just sort of to establish that there's gravity. I'll drag him up here, and we'll associate some gravity with him and collisions. Now, I think before I do any of that, I know that this is going to collide with the red parts, the wall and the floors. And as it stands now, nothing's locked down, so I might as well lock these down with respect to their movability. So I'll go to floor right now, and we'll deal with the physics at this time. Physics. I'll just scroll this down here. Movable, uncheck. Now the other thing I want to do while I'm here to be efficient is I don't want a lot of crazy bounciness and drag and so on. So I'm going to turn the density, friction, and bounciness all to 0. Okay, so there won't be any of these attributes playing on the performance of the actor as it moves around. And I will do the same for the wall. So I've turned off the movable, which is the most important aspect in the physics. Let me select wall, open up the physics tab, and again turn the density, friction, and bounciness all to 0, and turn off the movable check mark. Okay, so just a little preemptive troubleshooting, if you will, knowing from experience that when this bounces on things, if they're not locked down, they will just go flying. Okay, let me just save that on the keyboard, Control S. All right, and at this point, I think I'm sort of prepared to put an accelerate behavior onto the hero. So let me just select the hero. I can select it here, or I can select it here. But I want to make sure I'm working in the prototype, not in the instance. Okay, just a reminder, prototype. And let's go over to our behaviors, and we will apply an accelerate behavior. And we want it to move downward, so the degree, it goes by degrees. 270 degrees is the downwards motion. And I'm going to really accelerate this. I'm going to bump it up to 800. All right. And you know what? While I'm here too on the actor, I'm going to go into the physics. I know the bounciness is going to be crazy at 1. So let's just go in here and change it to point. I don't know. I'd say anything under 0.25. So I'll stick with 0.25. Hit my enter key. Save my file on the keyboard and give it a quick test, because now I have something to test, which is the accelerate. I can predict that it's just going to fall through the floor because I haven't applied a collision yet. But let's just see, and there we go. Okay, back to editor. Let's apply a collide feature to that actor as well. So when it collides with the floor and the wall, that it will not go past it. So for that sake, I'm going to create a new tag. I went over to my actors tab, new tag, I'll call it ground. Okay, I guess I could have called it boundaries or something, but ground's a nice short word. And we just drag the actors over that tag, and I can open that up and you'll see what's in there. So I'm dragging floor and ground over top of that. All right, so back to my actor called hero. I'm inside the prototype backstage, and I'm going to add another behavior, and this one is the collide behavior. Okay, we just drag that down there, and this time I want to set it actor with tag. That's why I just created the tags there. Tag called ground. There we go. Let's just save that again. I'll just save it up here. And quick test. Okay, and the bounce is not bad. You can always reset it here to play it over again. Bounce, I think I'm going to live with that. That was 0.25 on the bounce for the hero. So let's add some movement now, left, right, and jump. And then we'll deal with the double jump at the very end and the logic for that. So I'm just going to close these guys. I'm going to do the movement a little differently today. So I'm going to create a rule for that. And it's kind of going to work on the negative. I'm going to say when this condition exists, do nothing. Otherwise, do the movements. And I'm going to have a rule within a rule, if you will. But let's start with the conditions here. So I'm just going to shortcut it in the window at this time. And the first one I want to have is the key. So when the right key is pressed, I'm going to do this for all three, is up. When it's up, do the following. Well, let me just do all three keys that I'm playing with today. This will be the left key. Left is up. And then the last key again here, K, hit my enter, and hit my space bar, and then set this to the word up. So when these three are up, let me move this all the way up here, do the following. Okay, for the next step now, I'm going to say change the velocity to 0. So that's a change attribute, actually. I know we do have change velocity, but I want to change the attribute. So I'm going to drag that guy into here. And let's just go dig down under this change attribute tab. And it's the attribute of the hero. And it's the motion, linear velocity, and it's the x-axis. I double clicked on that. And I want to set it to 0. In other words, stop. 0, hit my tab key to enter that. Okay, so when these 3 keys are up, in other words, not pressed, the velocity is set, the x left and right is set to 0. And this is where we actually start to add motion. So I'm going to click open the else, and I'm going to add a new rule in here. I can type in R and just choose rule. And let me just scroll up here, and the condition will be the key pressed and whether it's on the platform. So let's just, whoops, sorry here, let's just click key. Which key? The right key. And this time I will stick with the default down. And when the key is down, well, let me actually add my second condition first, which is the collision. Okay, when it actor of type floor. All right, we just want it the floor, not the walls. Okay, so actor of type floor, and that's why I made 2 different actors. So when the right key is pressed and it's on the ground, do the following, which will be a change attribute once again. So I will just type in the letter C. Happens to be the first one in my choices. Click on that little letter A. Let's move this guy up and dig down for the attribute for my hero, for motion, linear velocity X. And I'll set it to 200. Now positive number moves to the right, negative numbers move to the left. Hit my tab key. I'm just going to save this and give it a quick test. It's something changed that's worth testing. So when it hits the ground and I hit my right key, it should move. And it does. So that proves that that works. So I can actually probably duplicate that for the left key. But I'm going to change the rule name to move right. Now this is a rule contained in the else section of a bigger rule. Okay, so we are nesting rules at this point. Okay, so that's the first one called move right. I've collapsed that to make this a little easier. Alt click and drag. I will name this one move left. And we'll just scroll up here and we'll change the key to the left key. And then the do. I just need to change the number to a negative number, which means it will move to the left. Same speed, 200. Hit my tab key to enter that. Save it. And those changes should now give me a left motion. So let's just check that out. And if I hit my left key, it works. If I hit right key, it works. So excellent. So now we're just going to do that for the jump. All right, and then we'll deal with that logic for the double jump. Okay, but so far so good. We're doing well here. All right, so I'm going to collapse that as well and duplicate the move left. Alt click and drag. I'll drag it upwards. Okay, I'm just going to drag it up above there. Make sure, okay, we're good here. I'm just going to name this one jump. Okay, so this will be the space bar, so I'll highlight the key press and hit my space bar. And under do, we have to change this to the y-axis, so I actually have to come back in here and do all of this all over again. Hero, motion, linear velocity, double click the y, and I'm going to set this through trial and error. I happen to know that 500 is going to give me what I want. I could have done 200, tested it, raised the number, but I've tried this and I know 500. Now positive numbers move upwards, negative numbers move downwards. Okay, so I'm hitting my tab key to enter that. And so if the space bar is pressed and the actor is on the floor, it will jump. This is not the double jump feature yet, but let me just save this to make sure the basic jump works. Okay, so it hits the ground, and if I hit the space bar, there we go. Now, because that 500, that made my jump go high enough, but not so high that one jump would get it to the platform on one try. So you see it just comes short there. And the other thing too is when we're working with velocities versus the move behavior, it does carry the momentum. So if I'm moving in one direction and I hit the space bar while that key is down, because I can hold the key down, left or right, I can hold it down and pop that space bar. Now if I hold it, you can see there I'm getting some toppling. So I'm going to deal with that right now. All right. I'm glad this actually happened now. I'm going to deal with that right now on the hero. And that is in physics. And that is fixed rotation. Okay, so we just fix rotation and it will no longer topple. Let me just save that. We'll do a quick test once again here. Play. Okay, so as I'm bouncing along here, even when it hits the wall, it's not going to topple. But the nice thing is with this change attribute, I do get that smoother flow of motion. It's more natural, where the move behavior is very rigid. Okay, but I don't have enough height to jump to the next level. So this is where we're going to introduce that interesting feature called double jump. And it's another way to introduce us to custom attributes in the actor. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a counter. Here's the logic, as I explained earlier. When the actor hero hits the ground, we will reset the counter to the number 2, the value of the counter. It's like a variable. And a variable is a container of information with a value, and that value within the container can change or be changed. So we're going to change it to the number of 2, and the logic is the following. When I hit the space bar, I will put in some code to deduct 1 from that value every time I hit the space bar. So it starts at 2 when it's on the ground, and when it's up in the air, as soon as I hit the space bar, it deducts 1. So when it's in the air, that value is changed from a 2 to a 1. And if I hit the spacebar the second time, that value goes down to 0 because it's 1 minus 1. And I'm going to add one more condition that will only jump if that value is greater than 0. Okay, so let's create our custom attribute now. I'm just going to close this and actually close this. I'll just call this move rule. Move rule. Okay. And we're going to create a custom attribute in our actor. So we do that by hitting this little plus sign. And we have different kinds of attributes that we can create. The one we want is called integer, which holds whole numbers. That's 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. It does not hold numbers that are fractions or decimals, just whole numbers. So it's known as an integer. And then it creates it right here, new attribute. And I'm just going to double click it to name it, and I'll call it jump count. I'm doing what's called camel case, so no spaces in the names. You shouldn't put spaces in the names, but you can capitalize letters. So I called it jump count. I hit my enter key to submit it. So I have a custom attribute called jump count, currently holding the value of 0. I can, as you see there, highlight it and change the default value, but I'm going to leave the default value at 0. Okay, so that's one element that we needed to create in order to track how many times we click the space bar. Okay, so it's called jump count. Just remember that. Okay, so let's create a new rule so that when it hits the ground, it resets it to 2. Then we're going to go back and revise some of our move rules. So I'll start by creating the rule. I'll call it jump reset, something like that. And I'll say when it collides, so it's a collision, with actor of type floor, do the following. And the following will be changing an attribute. So I'll hit my C here, change attribute. And I'll go in and I'll dig down for that custom attribute. Hero, oh, I accidentally double click too quickly. Let me just reset that again. Hero. The attribute is called jump count. Double click that. So I want to set it to 2. And this is where you actually can control how many multiple jumps you can have. So I'm going to set it to 2. Hit my enter key or my tab key. Alright, so that 0 will change to a 2 when my hero touches the ground, or touches the floor to be more specific. Okay, so that's part of it. It still needs some other adjustments. So I will go into the move rules and we'll change the jump feature. Okay, so let me just close this, and under the else, under jump, just going down to the do, I'm going to add a change attribute. This is where I'm going to subtract 1 from each time I hit the space bar. So I can hit my C here, change attribute. I got to find the counter. Change attribute, hero, jump count, 2. Now this is the tricky part, or very important that you do this properly. You cannot type this in. You got to go to what's called the expression editor. It works very much like this one. Click on it and find that same attribute, hero, jump count. And in this little window up here, we're going to type in -1. So let me just delete all those and show you again. Under hero, jump count, double click it, and then manually type in -1. So what that's doing is it's subtracting 1 from the value. The value is hidden from you. So this is like the container of that value, but I'm saying every time I hit the space bar, subtract 1 from the value that's contained within this attribute. So you do have to hit the green check mark to accept it. So the logic is set the value of jump count to the value of jump count -1, and that's how you subtract 1. And it's up here that I actually need to change. Yeah, I need to delete that and then change the condition. So I'm just going to delete that condition. Let me just type it in here maybe. Attribute. Okay, if the attribute called jump count is greater, that's with the open part of the V pointing to the left, is greater than 0, jump. Okay, so I had changed one of my conditions. I deleted the original condition, which was if it's on the ground. I replaced that with if the jump count value is greater than 0. When it hits the ground, it will be 2. So therefore, it will be greater than 0. So it's just a whole different logic in how to trigger the jumps, if you will. And then down here, when it jumps, it does subtract 1 every time I hit the space bar. Therefore, when I close this, when it sets back to 2, if I subtract that twice, by hitting the space bar twice, it goes back to 0. It's no longer greater than 0. No longer will jump until it hits the ground and resets to 0. Let's just save this and test this. Okay. Now you don't know it works until you actually test it. I've done this a long time, but trust me, I make errors every day all the time, and that's why you test constantly. Okay, so there's my motion. Jump, jump, there we go. Okay, now just to prove it, I'll bring it to the ground and I'll hit it many times. 1, 2, but after the second one, it no longer responds. 1, 2, and no longer responds. Okay, so that's how we create a double jump. I could set that number 2 to a 3 to a 5, and that would dictate how many times I can jump before it fails to respond. Okay, so I want you to create this today and then zip it up and submit that to Blackboard. So 1, 2, there we go. 1, 2. All right, and you can hold down your arrow keys while you hit the space bar. Okay, so as I said, this is your exercise for today. When you've got it completed, zip up your project folder and submit it to Blackboard. Thank you.